Hey guys, Wario Style, and people have been wanting a new Mega Man 2D platformer for years now, in any of the series, but Capcom may just refuse to oblige. That being said, I think we can leave it to the indies to scratch that Mega Man itch when Capcom is wrong.
This is Gravity Circuit. It's an indie game that plays like a combination of a bunch of different Mega Man games with its own really cool additions added on top. And these Mega Man comparisons don't just come because it's a platformer with a bunch of robots. When you play this game, you get some classic Mega Man, as well as some X, and some Zero.
And trust me, that's not a bad thing.
After booting up the game, getting past the rockin' title screen music, and selecting a save file, you are greeted with an opening cinematic that explains the plot. So here's the basic rundown. Years ago, the evil virus army attacked the robots of the world, and they could not be stopped. That is, until the Circuit showed up and fought off the virus army, saving the world. The sad part is that in the process of saving the world, all of the circuits disappeared except one, the Gravity Circuit, whose body is badly damaged and won't power on. Years later, the virus army returns, and it's up to you, the newly reawakened Gravity Circuit, to save the world once again. Despite its simplicity, I actually do like the story in this game, as it more than serves its purpose of adding stakes and intrigue to the adventure, and it even has a few fun twists thrown in that add to the deep Gravity Circuit lore. Another thing that is just great about this game is how the player controls.
I mean, in this game you have a grappling hook, and you can swing around like Spider-Man. It's a 10 out of 10 game.
Now, you can unlock a whole bunch of cool new abilities in this game, but when you start off, Kai the Gravity Circuit has a completely full move set that is very much acceptable to play the entire game with. You obviously have your basic moving and jumping, which is all very smooth and feels great, but you also have a run button which you can hold down at any time to get an instant burst of speed. This leads to you wanting to just blast through the levels in a really fun and engaging way. Your other main traversal method is the aforementioned grappling hook, which is one of my favorite ways to move around in this game. Not only can you dash into a grappling swing without losing any speed, which is very satisfying, but you can also tailor the length of your grappling hook to whatever you need at any given time. This all leads to a very snappy and responsive movement experience that is immensely satisfying. Now, Gravity Circuit doesn't really try and hide the fact that its movement is inspired a lot by games like Mega Man Zero, but one of the biggest things that this game does differently from other games of a similar style is in the combat. Unlike games like Mega Man, Gravity Circuit has no projectile attack or gun equivalent. The closest you're going to get is attacking with the hookshot, which is definitely a good option in some scenarios, but mostly you're going to want to use this game's melee combat. Alright, so Kai has the ability to punch to the sides as well as swing his arms above him and dive downwards into enemies from above. This moveset may be simple, but it's very well put together and it is tailored towards weaving attacks into each other. This leads to a satisfying combat loop that involves going in close to enemies for an attack and then backing off and dodging some stuff just to weave back in for some more attacking. But the second element of this game's combat may be the most unique and interesting of the two. You see, when you first take out an enemy, they will go gray and stop moving. From here you have a choice. Either overkill the enemy, causing them to go red and drop extra money and energy for you to use later. Or, you can use your grappling hook to pick up the dead enemy and throw them at a live enemy, dealing massive damage and causing the live enemy to go gray, repeating this cycle. This causes a loop of risk and reward that encourages mastery of the game's combat so that you can find your optimal strategy. The combat in this game is really amazing, and it does a really good job of mixing run and gun gameplay with some of the best beat-em-up elements in a way that feels good and refreshing.
Honestly, the way this game weaves together platforming and combat really surpasses even its closest inspiration and competitor at times, that being Mega Man Zero.
Alright, but now we're on to the meat and potatoes. The main action in Gravity Circuit is split up into 12 levels, 8 of which the player can tackle in any order that they please. This may sound like it's not a lot of levels, but each level is plenty long and they are very well thought out. Think of something like Mega Man or Shovel Knight. Each level is structured as an obstacle course that slowly builds upon the level's gimmicks as it goes on. For example, the music level uses these speakers that can emit a sound wave that damage the player. At the start of the level, you just have to jump over a few of these that are embedded into the ground, but by the end of the level, you are timing wall jumps to avoid touching walls made out of these speakers that are emitting waves at different times so that you have to be constantly on the move. And the speakers are not the only cool level gimmick that this game has. All 8 of the main levels in this game have a really cool and unique theme that leads to a bunch of well done and well utilized gimmicks. I don't want to spoil too many of these, but here's just a few of the standout ones. A musical level that has you climbing up a building to reach a concert stage to fight the Wave Circuit. A fast-moving highway full of trucks and alternate pathways. And finally, a green electrical power plant level that has you dodging electric floors and lightning to get to a generator at the center of the facility. Oh, and I should also mention that the final 3 levels do not have their own standalone themes, but instead they challenge the player by crafting a bunch of new challenges with a bunch of the old gimmicks. I also really like how this game handles its difficulty. The game does have 3 difficulty presets, but I'm talking more about how the game's challenges are designed. The game is challenging, it's by no means a cakewalk, but it's in a fun and fair way. I almost never felt like a challenge was impossible, and when I failed, it was because I was the one who did something wrong. This led me wanting to come back and beat the challenges I first failed at instead of having me want to throw my controller at the wall and turn the game off. The game also has infinite lives and a good number of checkpoints, so you're never going to lose an unfair amount of progress.
Honestly, I love how this game has infinite lives, because I just find lives in retro-inspired games to be archaic and frustrating. But hey, if you like lives in your retro-inspired games, please tell me why. I'd love to see some arguments in the comments.
Oh yeah, and this game is also chocked full of breakable walls and other secret passages that almost always lead to some kind of collectible. But that's not to say that just finding the passages is enough to grab the goods. Most passages lead to a platforming challenge that you'll have to complete in order to collect the rewards that wait for you at the end. These secret passages are not only fun to find, but they'll also have you wondering what goodies await at the end of the little platforming challenges that they provide. These collectibles that can be found at the end of the secret passages also help the game a lot, because they almost always do more than just make a little number go up, although sometimes that is enough.
Yes!
Almost all of the collectibles in Gravity Circuit ultimately lead to some kind of upgrade for Kai. These upgrades can range from health and energy increases to tokens, pallet chips, and money that can be used throughout the adventure to get new moves and passive abilities back at the hub world. Because these rewards don't feel arbitrary, and the rewards are gained fairly consistently throughout the adventure, there is a real incentive to find them all. In fact, I found myself much more tempted to 100% this game than, like, a game that uses the Zelda Korok Seed system. Speaking of the chips you can collect, I do feel like we should get more in depth with those. Basically, instead of using something like a skill tree, this game allows you to equip 8 modifier chips at a time. The way these chips work is as follows. The first chip variant are the modifier chips. You're allowed to use 3 of these chips at a time, and they can provide passive abilities such as lessening spike damage, as well as new moves such as double jump and a Wario Land style arm charge.
I think it might be obvious to use that last one.
A big reason why I like these chips is because it's really easy to mix and match them, not only just to find a combination that matches your playstyle, but to also find a combination that covers for some of your weaknesses. For example, you can equip the arm charge if you find yourself dashing into enemies too much, and you can equip the double jump if you need some extra platforming help. The limit to the number of these chips you can have equipped at one time also leads to a system that really makes you choose what you really need and what you can live without. The second type of chips that you can find in this game are the combat chips. You're allowed to have 4 of these at a time, and they act as extra powerful special attacks. These attacks cannot just be used willy-nilly though, as they take up some of your reserved energy to use. This leads to you having to decide when it's a good time to use these abilities and when it's best to save them up for later. Some examples of what these chips can do include a powerful uppercut that gives heightened massive damage, a giant laser that damages all of the enemies in its path, and a heavenly pile drive that pile drives enemies straight into the ground. The third and final chip type that can be found in this game are the pallet chips, and despite what the name of these chips might have you believe, they are far more than just a simple pallet swap. Those of you who've been keeping count will realize that you can only have 1 of these chips at a time, and that's because they are far more powerful than any of the other chips. These chips not only change the color of the gravity circuit, but they also give him cool new abilities such as electricity that he can fire or a downward laser that gives damage to enemies and slows down your falling. All of this leads to a mechanic that can easily have you picking a favorite chip or swapping out chips between different levels all of the time. This chip system is a great addition to the gameplay, and it leads to you feeling like you're on top of the world and that you could take on anything by the end of the game, even some of the game's bosses, which are also stellar. And man, do I really like the bosses in this game. Plot-wise, they're your old friends who have turned on you unexpectedly, but gameplay-wise, they represent the final challenges of each level. Each boss in this game has several attacks that keep you on edge, but they also have a special attack that they only use once or twice per battle. All of these attacks also tie into the game's level gimmicks, so each boss really does feel like a proper conclusion to the level that precedes it. The best way that I can really think to describe this game's boss battles is like a dance. The way these bosses are designed makes it so that you have to really get into a rhythm with the boss as you anticipate the boss's attacks and dodge and weave to try and land your own attacks in the gaps of your opponent's barrages of powerful moves. Add in trying to land combat chip attacks in, and you have a list of fun and engaging boss battles that almost ensure a good time. The boss battles in this game almost remind me of Hollow Knight, and that is not a bad thing. It is no surprise that I found myself spending a lot of time in this game's boss battle simulator mode, and that these fights are definitely a standout part of Gravity Circuit for me. As this review comes to a close, I do want to take some time to shout out some of the lesser elements that this game does really well. This game goes for a retro 80s and 90s aesthetic that I think fits very well with the fast-paced and dark tones of the game. The pixel art in this game blends 16-bit with modern, and it is very well done in a way that had me stopping mid-level just to take a look at the game's beautiful background scenery. The soundtrack in this game is also very well done, and I recommend giving the whole thing a listen, as the tracks feel more like real chiptune songs than video game melodies.
And with that, this fairly long review of a really good game comes to a close. I really am a huge fan of the way that this game weaves together old and new in a way that is immensely satisfying. With that being said, I really can't give Gravity Circuit any less than a 9 out of 10, and it's a must-play for anyone who's a fan of the Blue Bomber or anyone who just wants a really solid 2D action game. If you want some pixelated action, you really can't get much better than Gravity Circuit. Wario style, and I'll see you all next time.